Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I step off the train and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good evening, dear listeners. It is Tuesday evening, November 5th, and I am footloose and fancy-free. I always love a Tuesday afternoon because I got my game night coming up. My big teaching load is done for the week. It's glorious. So I'm in a good mood. Thought I'd talk some games. Before I do, I want to take a moment to give a shout out. My buddy Jason Brooks, who is a game developer and the founder and owner of Brooks Spun Games, has a game on Kickstarter right now. It's going bananas. It's called Legacies. It's he calls it medium heavy. I call it heavy. Euro game. It uses multi-use cards and a robust economic system to have you develop a legacy over the course of 6 generations, 300 years. If a heavy Euro game with lots of replayability and lots of player interaction sounds interesting to you, go check it out. It's on Kickstarter right now. The base game is $70, and they have a deluxe version for $100 that comes with metal coins. So that's Legacies from Brooks Spun Games. Little free advertising from your friends at Rattlebox Games. I will say I've played the game a couple times. I would rate it an 8. It's a pretty good game. I've decided not to get it myself because I know Jason, so he's going to have it, and my game club will certainly have a copy. So I can't really justify getting it right now, especially because a game that big, I'm never going to play it. If I ever get a hankering to play it, I can certainly arrange with Jason or one of my other friends who does get it to play it. So there it is. So, Legacies, check it out. So today's theme, I realized there was a mode of the show that I hadn't done in a while, so I thought I would give it a try, and that's Duel. And in fact, this is going to be the Rattlebox Games Pick Up and Deliver Digital Duel. So if you haven't heard a Duel episode, basically what it is, I take two games that I know pretty well and have played a number of times that I feel like overlap in some way. They meet some particular set of circumstances that puts them in the same headspace for me, and I spend an episode comparing them, thinking about where they succeed, where they fail, and so on. So today I'm going to do a digital duel, by which I mean I'm going to take two games that I've mostly played in digital form. In fact, one of the games I've never played on the table. The other one I played once and we got the scoring wrong. Two games that I play regularly on boîte à jeux. I would say I have not 10 games of Concordia, but I'd say I have 6. So I have it's Concordia and Castles of Burgundy. Now, there's a couple reasons I point to these games as overlapping. I will highlight those as we go along. But essentially, the main thing is that they are both medium weight Euro games that I play on boîte à jeux. So I tend to play them at the same time. I often have a turn at Castles of Burgundy and then a turn at Concordia and call it a day. So these are games that overlap for me significantly in just my experience, not counting the way they play. I think they also, for me, take a similar amount of cognitive effort, that they're both on the slightly heavier side of medium weight, but still what I would call medium weight games. They're not too aggressively difficult, but they're not easy either. So let's get right to it. Castles of Burgundy is a Stefan Feld game in which you are a person building some castles in Burgundy. Burgundy being a region of France. And basically it is a tile collection game in which you take dice, you roll 2 dice every round, And those dice let you take actions, either putting tiles onto your board or collecting tiles from the market or doing a couple other things. You get points in a whole bunch of different ways. Castles of Burgundy is the epitome of a point salad game. But there are some ways that are more successful than others. The board is divided up by color. Whenever you complete a region of the board of matching colors, you score points based on how big that region is and in what era. There's 5 rounds of the game. In what round you completed that region. So the earlier you complete a region, the more points you get. There's a bunch of other stuff too, but I don't know that explaining it via a podcast makes much sense. So that's Castles of Burgundy. The other game is Concordia. This is Matt Gertz design. Mac Gertz. And, or Matt Gertz. I think it's Mac Gertz. And this is a game, hand management game. You have a hand of cards, and each time you play one of your cards, you get to do something. The cards all have different, for lack of better words, suits. They have different Greek gods on them, or Roman gods, and those Roman gods correspond to different scoring conditions. You have little travelers who are moving around the ancient world. You have resources that you collect and spend to build little trading houses and to get more colonists, they call them, or travelers, and use those travelers to get more resources, use the resources to buy more cards, use the cards to do these things all over and over again. The central mechanism of the game is this hand of cards, which as you play it gets smaller and smaller until you play the card that lets you pick up all the other cards. When you do that, if you've played enough of the cards, you get a bonus. So the game encourages you to play your whole hand out, or most of your hand out, before you pick it up. And of course that hand gets bigger as you buy cards. At the end of the game, the cards that you've bought also become your scoring multipliers. So there's a bunch of different scoring methods and a bunch of different cards that feed into these scoring methods. That's about as much as I think I can explain over the podcast. So that's Castles of Burgundy and Concordia. So I picked out 5 key factors that we could consider in thinking about these two games dueling it out. The first is luck. Concordia is minimally luck related. You all start with the same number of cards. You start with your people in the same place. The only place where luck is involved is the market of cards that you can buy. And this is certainly input randomness, in that the market of cards is drawn before you take any turns. And it takes a little while for anyone to get enough resources to buy cards. So the overall tenor of the early phase of the game is trying to get an engine going and then buy cards with that engine. So there is a little bit of luck in the order that those cards come out, but it's pretty minimal. By contrast, Castles of Burgundy, like I said, you're rolling 2 dice every round, and then you do something with those dice. Now you are allowed to adjust those dice using these worker tiles, and you can get more worker tiles by sacrificing one of your dice, but you only get a handful of turns. You get 5 times 5. You get 25 turns for the whole game. So to sacrifice one of those 2 dice is it hurts. That's not my favorite thing to do. But sometimes you have to, because you have to adjust your tiles up or down, or your dice up or down, in order to do anything. Because you can only hold 3 cards. You can only buy 3 tiles from the market at a time before you play some. So if you've bought your 3 tiles and then you roll something that doesn't allow you to play any of them, that can really hurt. But with careful planning, you should be able to avoid that most of the time. So, but in terms of the amount of luck, I would say Concordia comes out ahead on the luck factor, because Castles of Burgundy does use this luck. Even though it is output random or input randomness, you see what happens to the dice before you decide what you're doing. It still can be kind of swingy. Neither game is particularly strong on theme. I'd say Concordia is a little better, but barely. Neither game gives you much in the way of a narrative emerging from the theme that you're using. And both games are kind of boring to look at. So I would give neither game any kind of advantage on theme. Each game has an interesting central mechanism, the dice allowing you to choose the tiles and putting the tiles on your board. In Castles of Burgundy is pretty interesting. But the card management in Concordia is more interesting. This idea of playing cards until you're running low and then deciding when you want to use a turn to get your cards back and basically get nothing done. Constantly being worried about how many things you have and trying to plan 2, 3, 4 turns ahead is really pretty interesting as a mechanism. So again, Concordia for me comes out ahead on the central mechanism. With regard to replayability, I would actually put Castles of Burgundy ahead here. There are lots of different tiles and lots of different ways that those tiles might come up. And I think that the complex interaction of dice and tiles means that you're constantly thinking in a way that Concordia feels a little samey. Now, Concordia gets around this by having lots of different maps. And the different maps obviously allow for different paths. But I would suggest that the different maps are in fact evidence of the sameness rather than proof against it. Because while I don't play Concordia enough to have mastered the base map, other people obviously have, and they have clear moves that you make. I wouldn't say the game could be solved because you never know which cards are coming out in the market. But when experienced players have a way that they always start the game, that does give me pause. So from that perspective, I would say Castles of Burgundy has the upper hand in terms of replayability. And finally, I wanted to draw attention to the online experience. I know there's a variety of places to play Castles of Burgundy and perhaps Concordia as well. I played them on Boîte à Jeux, which is a relatively unadorned website. It's not quite as snazzy as Board Game Arena, which is why Board Game Arena gets my subscription money, and Boîte à Jeux, I am a filthy freeloader. Nonetheless, I do enjoy both games as they are rendered in the place in Boîte à Jeux, and they're easy enough to play without making too many mistakes. My first game of Castles of Burgundy, I certainly had a little bit of confusion with the interface, and I'm sure I did it with Concordia as well, but frankly it's been so long since the first game of Concordia I played there that I don't really remember those troubles. Either way, I'd say the experience is pretty solid between both Castles of Burgundy and Concordia on Boîte à Jeux. Quite delightful, fun to play, really good asynchronous games because you take your turn and then you wait for other people to take their turns. You don't really need to take the turn. That said, both games also have proven particularly tricky for me to, as Robert Heinlein put it, grok. Grok means to understand deeply, and I would say when I've played a tabletop board game 5 times, I generally have grokked it pretty well. I get how the mechanisms work. I understand the interactions. So if I had played these games as much in person as I have online, I would feel pretty comfy with them. Instead, playing them online, where I'm making one move a day, where I kind of taught the rules by watching a video quickly or skimming the rules. I didn't really do a full teach, in part because I didn't have the games in front of me. I'm still having a lot of trouble really grasping how to make the most out of the points. With Castles of Burgundy, again, it's because there's so many different ways you score. And this might be a laziness factor. I just haven't gone to look up how the scoring works. Again, I looked it up before and I learned it, but then it's been a while. So I'm always a little mystified about where my points are coming from. And as a result, I'm probably not as good at it as I could be. By contrast, Concordia, I understand where the scoring comes from, but boy, I cannot get my head around how to do well at the game. Like, I feel like it is a game of balancing even choices really thoroughly in a way that I just don't understand how to make the game, how to amplify the power of the game. The only time I've ever done well at the game was when we were not playing properly, and I went all in on the Jupiter strategy. Now, the Jupiter cards, if I recall, I might be getting the category wrong, but I think it's the Jupiter cards, where they give you points for each Jupiter card you have gives you a point for every region where you have a house. So I just doubled down on building houses and buying Jupiter cards. I didn't worry about anything else. I maximized the number of regions I had and maximized the number of Jupiter cards that I had. And in my head, that still works as a mechanism. But in reality, I have trouble piecing together the strategy in a way that is satisfying. So, in terms of learnability or the depth of understanding that I look for in a game like this, I haven't got it with either Castles of Burgundy or Concordia, which maybe puts them even. So that brings me to the end of my duel. Which game do you think won? I compared them both. I'd ask which one you won. I did not articulate which game I like better. I like them both. I think they're both fun. I look forward to playing them in person again. I feel like I'll really get the hang of it better once I played them in person a little bit more. That said, I am enjoying playing them quite a bit. And if you'd like to join me, hop over to Boîte à Jeux or Board Game Arena, where my username is Wombat929. My username is also Wombat929 on Board Game Geek, where we have a guild for the podcast, Guild 3269. And I'd love to hear what games you've been playing online. And if you're interested, join me for a game. A number of you already have. It's great. Well, that's it for me today. Thank you for joining me, and I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.